What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. Well, it looks like we have some information around The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom with how it's done initially in sales. These coming out of Japan showing a very strong opening for the game, as well as even some glitches and things people are discovering that are allowing you to play as Link further into the game, or even beating the whole thing in about an hour. We'll go over all of that here today. Also, we are going to be talking about what seems to be another big title coming out of Sony's first-party studios. This one maybe being lined up for next year and may not come as too much of a shock for many of you. And then we'll also be taking another look at Metal Gear Solid Delta with plans around how exactly you're going to play it and how the game is going to adapt to either playstyle. So if you guys enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button, helps out a ton. And if new here to the Spawn Wave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And of course, members of the channel do get Newswave early. If you would like to learn more about that, click the join button down below this video. And we're gonna start today with Assassin's Creed Shadows, which, as we know, has now been pushed into 2025, coming out now February 14th. And we're getting more and more information out of Tom Henderson over on Insider Gaming. And the most recent one is actually a pretty big game mode that could change sort of the gameplay all the way around for this title, which we can see this posted up over on Insider Gaming. They say Assassin's Creed Shadows currently has a co-op mode in development, which is scheduled to release post-launch. So, I mean, there'll still be most likely a roadmap in place, as they've sort of talked about how, like, the first expansion will just be free, basically. It'll be right there for you. So I guess this would be maybe part of that, or even later on, as I'm sure Shadows is something they would like to continue with for a while, as it wasn't a cheap project in general. And we've seen Ubisoft build on their different Assassin's Creed games like Valhalla going forward year over year. And this, I would assume the two protagonists would team up, and maybe you can play co-op online together even and go through different parts of the game, or maybe the entire thing. So that would kind of be interesting to try out. But also there is apparently a big Assassin's Creed multiplayer game coming up sometime in 2025 as well. I assume that would be in the later half of the year, since now they have to make room for Shadows. Also, Dragon Ball Sparking Zero is coming up next week. There's also an early access period, like where you get the deluxe or the super edition version, and you can get in a few days early. So I expected at that point the game to start just showing up online with all kinds of cutscenes and technically spoilers, even though it's Dragon Ball. Like, we kind of know the story since they make games, then tell it over and over and over again, but still, it appears someone was actually streaming the game for prolonged periods of time yesterday. And not only did we get like the opening cinematic, the cutscene, which looks awesome, it seems like we are getting other details and just blocks of gameplay showing up online from that stream, which at the time of this recording was pulled down either by the user or by just Bandai. Most likely it was probably Bandai cutting it down, and then they deleted it from there, or unlisted or privated, whatever. But yeah, it seems like Dragon Ball Sparking Zero is starting to find its way out to the public, so I guess just be careful of spoilers. Again, I know it's Dragon Ball, we know the story, but the thing about these game releases is everything else around that, how they present some of the story, the different cutscenes, and the different animations and effects. There are a lot of really cool things that I'm expecting coming out of Sparking Zero with these newer systems and stuff, so in that regard, yes, it would be spoiler territory, and maybe there's some fun what-if scenarios and more original storylines that they pursue here. So just keep that in mind, at least going into next week. You may have some spoilers popping up online. Oh, and we did get an acknowledgement for Prince of Persia, as they had an anniversary. Actually, we can see this over there on their official account. It says, wish a happy 35th anniversary to Prince of Persia. Today's the day we're beyond excited to show you all of our surprises and share our love of Prince of Persia with you guys. Stay tuned. And people were like, oh, surprises, huh? I mean, 35 years of Prince of Persia. This goes back to like those old 2D looking Prince of Persias from way back in the day, and then obviously up to some of the 3D stuff they were doing, and then most recently with the 2D Metroidvania that was actually very good. At least I enjoyed it quite a bit, actually. And of course, we're still sitting here waiting to hear about Sands of Time remake, and it feels like it's going to be a while for that one. But who knows, maybe they have some other surprises up their sleeves. I saw some people wondering if there was a chance of a remaster for that Prince of Persia 2008 version, or maybe some others if they just want to throw them out there. It's hard to say. It could just be merchandise, but I guess we'll keep our eyes open for that one. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom. We have kind of two stories here. We'll start with some of the interesting gameplay and really sequence breaking that people are discovering for it, and then we'll circle back around to the sales later on in the show. So let's actually first talk about how people have figured out that you can be Link beyond like the opening, I don't know, 30 minutes or so of the game, which we can see this posted up. This is over on Nintendo Everything, and they actually have the list of the steps to do this, which I'll have a link down below in the sources if you want to go through this and try it out for yourself. But there was a person on YouTube, Alio, who showed the method off in a recent video, and there's about 9 steps. A lot of it has to do with just setting things up early on in the game, but the one that I read that I was like, okay, that sounds kind of strange, is you need to put a sign down, hit it, and read it while trying to open the menu at the same time. So I'm like picturing the controller and trying to hit all these buttons and positioning it just right. It seems like something you're going to have to try multiple times to get it right. But as shown in the video, yeah, you'll end up becoming Link at the end of the whole thing. Like, not like, oh, you're Link, but you're like the blue spirit version of Link. No, it's just Link. And you're just rolling around with your sword, arrow, bombs, all that stuff. The only issue you run into is you can't use the rod to cast echoes, so you kind of can't finish the game or even progress very far in the game at all at that point. So it seems like it's just something fun to be able to do and just be like, oh yeah, I can glitch the game and become Link. Seems like something that they will fix, that Nintendo will fix, maybe in a patch later on. The other one, though, that I think becomes a bit more compelling, especially for speedrunners, is the ability to beat the game in under an hour. And this has to do with, essentially, sequence breaking the game through what they call a warp glitch. And it also looks very complex to figure out and get it just right, but essentially they figured out a way, that being really the speedrunning community, to start the game, and then by warping after a set number of steps, you'll end up at the end of the game with just a few hearts. Which sounds strange to most people, because you're like, well, I'd like to play through the entirety of the game and go to all the different dungeons that are more traditional in nature, with the twist of calling echoes and using some of their unique properties and all kinds of puzzle solving. I will say that. Sometimes you kind of sit there in a room for a bit and you're like, what am I supposed to do? Then you remember you have an ability even to just move stuff with basically Ultra Hand, and that solves the whole thing for you. But in this instance, for speedrunners, they just want to try to get to the end of the game as fast as possible. And at this time, it's about 52 minutes is the record. And I'm sure by the time you're seeing this video, it's probably gone down from there, since this is a fairly new thing and everyone's just trying to run at the game to try to get that time down further and further and further. But interesting stuff. And because it is such like something that certainly plays into the idea of being able to break it and experiment quite a bit with all these different echoes and physics in the game, it isn't shocking to see different glitches and sequence breaking techniques being found. And I actually expect this to be a game that will continue to live on quite a bit just due to different things being found through glitches. Next up, let's talk about Firesprite and apparently what they are working on. And we've kind of talked about them from time to time, as Siren came up as a potential game that they could, or a series that they could be rebooting with a new game, but now it kind of is lining up as to what they are planning, or at least working on now, and maybe showing up with in 2025. Well, Until Dawn Remake is now out, and people are, of course, going through it, and they're starting to discover a few differences here. And without really wading into like heavy spoiler territory, I'll leave it up to Eurogamer here. Where they say some have already managed to get their hands on the game prior to its official launch date, and as such, new information on the remake has started making the rounds online. This includes a new ending, which points to a potential sequel. So it's not shocking to think that we would see a new Until Dawn, mostly because they do have a movie coming up for the series, which, I mean, at that point, it would become a series with a sequel. And then we have Special Nick over on Twitter chiming in saying, "Call me selfish, but I'm annoyed I wasn't able to leak. I knew about this. But here's some more info I heard about this sequel, that being for Until Dawn 2. Apparently, it's Firesprite making it, which that's kind of been like alluded to. The idea with Firesprite is they were working on something horror related, and we saw this through different listings, like job postings and stuff, and it's like, okay, the Firesprite may be working on a new intellectual property that's horror themed. Maybe they're delving into Sony's archives, picking out an IP they like, and they want to bring back Like a Siren, or they're following up on a game that is suspiciously getting this remake or this remaster remake, right? We're looking at it, we're thinking, okay, we're seeing remasters happen. And it makes sense because you line it up next to initiatives that they're doing like The Last of Us. Okay, sure. But then here comes Until Dawn Remake, where they're moving it into UE5 and they're doing all kinds of work to it. And it's like, are they lining this up for something like a sequel? It does appear that's the case, and really we're seeing the Until Dawn remake happen now. Wouldn't shock me if maybe towards the end of 2025, we have Until Dawn 2 come out, and Firesprite's logo is right there to accompany it, but we'll keep an eye out maybe going into next year, as we would assume Sony should be having some kind of showcase at some point, like, especially going into next year. Yes, we have Ghost of Yote, which I still think is a very interesting looking game, and I want to find out more about it. But we're just trying to hear about, okay, is there going to be this Venom game that people have been kicking around? What's Naughty Dog working on? Because everybody's waiting for them to release their first original new game at this point. What's Blue Point doing? What's Ben Studio? The list goes on and on and on. So you feel like eventually you get that blowout event, and maybe that's where we would see Firesprite show up with Until Dawn 2. Next up, let's talk about Metal Gear Solid Delta, which I think had a great showing at Tokyo Game Show, and really we're just waiting to hear about the release date, and I'm excited to go back to Metal Gear Solid 3 with what's kind of described as a new coat of paint, as there are still things like the audio and stuff that they are using from that original game, just trying to keep it as close to the original vision as possible. And that's, especially nowadays where we see what happened to Final Fantasy VII, seems like kind of a breath of fresh air, which is weird to say that when it comes to some of these remakes. But it does appear we will have some alterations to it. For example, there will be two different play styles when it comes to the perspective of the game, which we can see this explained in a bit more detail. This over on Automaton Media, saying players can choose between new style and legacy style when playing Metal Gear Solid, but cannot switch between the two during gameplay. While a feature to switch between perspective styles was planned, Corcado stated that they had to scrap it since the new style made the old game too easy. Quote, the new style provides a wider linear field of view, which, if you look at some of the screenshots that they've shown so far and what's really felt like limited gameplay, the idea is they put the camera in a more of a third-person view, so your line of sight is much further than what the legacy style is. He goes on to say, and you could shoot your gun while moving Snake, which made the difficulty level lower than we had expected. However, if we were to adjust things to match the new style, that would make the legacy style too difficult. That's why we decided to split the two playstyles. So when you start the game, it's going to ask you, and maybe it's from like a loaded save file, not necessarily just the beginning of the game. Like if you pick new playstyle, you can never change the legacy playstyle. I assume you have to restart the game so it can recalibrate itself with AI and it understanding that, okay, you can see much further with the new style, and not see as much with legacy style because it's like a camera that's way up here and you're looking down on Snake in the jungle. And that way you can also have the enemy's line of sight and that kind of thing sort of more aligned with making the game challenging. Because with the Metal Gear Solid Twin Snakes, when that came out, really what happened was Silicon Knights took all of like the Metal Gear Solid 2 stuff that was worked on, first person mode, for example, ledge hang, a lot of things, just threw it in there and it made the game very, very easy. Some of the boss fights were just downright trivial because of it. And even getting around where you can hop over ledges backwards, ledge hang, drop down, you'll skip entire sections of the map completely. So that is something that had to take into account here, and I'm glad to hear that they did, because that would have been a whole can of worms if they didn't work that out, either through focus group testing or their own internal QA. But again, the more I hear about this game, Metal Gear Solid Delta, the more excited I am to finally get my hands on it. We just need to find out when, so here's hoping they're ready with that release date sometime soon, but it's pretty clear, yeah, not coming out this year. Even though we're all holding out hope, well, it's October, so I guess we'll see it in 2025. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom when it comes to its sales, specifically for the first few days on the market in Japan, which we can see this posted up. This is over on Installbase Forum with The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom at the top, 200,121 copies, which is very impressive actually for like an isometric 2D kind of Zelda game. Not like the, I mean, yes, it's 3D in a sense, but not the big 3D, like, Tears of the Kingdom style game. But we'll come back to that in a minute with some of the comparisons. Legend of Heroes takes up the next 2 spots, PS5 and PS4, 29,554 and then 17,838. Moving to EA Sports FC 25 on the Switch and the PS5, 13,332, 13,265. Then we have Astrobot, which has been hanging in there. I think it's just been kind of getting stocked up as they've gone along, and that's why you see like an 8% drop, for example. That now sitting at 34,902 copies in Japan. We have FC 25 again, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, Moyo, and then Animal Crossing New Horizons rounding out the top 10. Looking at the hardware, the Nintendo Switch was at the top, 74,351, so a nice spike, which I can assume was from Echoes of Wisdom, of course, from the previous week, up about 22,000 units in Japan. The PS5, 10,799, which is up, but it was a crushing blow for the PlayStation 5 in this region with that significant price increase. You just saw it plummet on the sales charts immediately when that happened. The Xbox Series S kind of just hanging out at the 500 mark, 557, and the PS4 somehow, someway, managed to sell 31 units. Now, a quick look over at Game Data Library. They pulled up all of the first week sales performances for the different Zelda games, saying that retail launch sales of Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom in Japan are 40% higher than Link's Awakening Remake. It's actually the second biggest launch on the Switch, and I had to double take that a little bit, but I said, you know what, it did technically sell better than something like Breath of the Wild or Skyward Sword day one, well behind Tears of the Kingdom, but still, it's Tears of the Kingdom. It's a heavily hyped up game, right? It does technically trail like some of the DS games and stuff, but the DS install size also was kind of overwhelming then, and technically those games were a bit cheaper, right, as that DS price point. But this is, to me, very impressive for Echoes of Wisdom, and I think this is just good news for anyone who likes traditional dungeon Zelda games, isometric Zelda games like I do. I mean, it seems like there is a future to do the setup where you have the big 3D Zelda game, like a year or two later, the isometric traditional Zelda game, back to the 3D Zelda game. I think that is a nice cadence, and occasionally you'll have like a remaster or a remake somewhere in there, as Nintendo themselves have said they want to have a Zelda game every single year. Well, when you see sales like these, I mean, it does kind of back up the idea that people aren't exactly getting tired of the franchise. They want more of it. So here's hoping they have plans for more isometric Zelda games in the future. I like the art style of what they've done here with Link's Awakening and Echoes of Wisdom, but I do think if they do a third one in that art style, it'll start to kind of dwindle on me a bit. And I'd like to see something new with that, especially going into next generation for the Switch 2, as we probably won't see an isometric Zelda game here for a few years then, with Echoes of Wisdom just releasing. But good start there. We'll see what Nintendo has to say at their next investors briefing if they're ready to share some sort of figure with us then. I would assume at that point probably millions of copies. And before we go to the comment of the day, we'll take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday. We're asked, if you picked up Zelda Echoes of Wisdom, have you been bothered by the frame rate? Now, I'm curious because I see some people online say, I don't even notice it, like, it's fine. And then others are like, I can't play it anymore because of it. But I mean, 67% say no, 33% say yes. And the thing that I've seen the most complained about is just the UI, having to scroll through your echoes, and yeah, it's tiring. It does. It halts the action completely, especially when I realize that the echo I'm looking for ends up being on the other side of the horizontal scroll. So takes a while to get there. I'm a little surprised they didn't think about this a bit more and go with like some sort of hotkey or like a wheel setup where you choose the furniture, then it spins out again, and you can look at like the bed or the table, the trampoline, and then the other side has like the enemies that you collect for your echoes. Just anything more intuitive than what they did here, because it just, when you have to go to that menu and realize how many you've accumulated, it's like, oh, okay, here we go. We're gonna see if we can find this, and you just hold left on the joystick for a while and just kind of sit there. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from Ian, who says, seems to be around a 50% chance of the timestamps actually showing on these videos. Must be a reason why it doesn't work some days. Yeah, it's very strange because they're always in the description. So if they're not there on the bar, if you look in the description, they will be there. Just sometimes for some reason, YouTube doesn't pick it up. And what ends up happening is very funny. When I do notice that they're not there in the morning, I go ahead and I delete like the top one, the first start line, save, and then put it back and hit save, and then it's fine. So I'm not really sure why. It might be the scheduling thing. It's hard to say, but I do work to fix it when I notice it's not there. But you're right. It's like a 50% shot of it actually appearing on like the timeline part of the YouTube video. If it's not there though, check the description. They should all be there and they're clickable. So you see the topic you're interested in, you hit it, and it should then jump you right to where that is in the video. Ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. If you missed yesterday's Newswave, I'll leave it up here in a card, or maybe you wanted to hear more discussion around The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom. Game and Talk with Sean RGT, Celia, and Josie today. Sit down for about 30 minutes or so just going over some of their thoughts for the game. I'll leave it right below it. Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.